Oh, we are live. Good evening, Pancho. Step outside. Can you just step outside, please? We are going to get started in about 30 seconds, just two more shares, and we are ready to go. I'm doing class for Michael Chavi in New York for the Chabad Women's Conference, the annual Rebbitzins Conference. And so I am running the asylum all by myself. I'm a very, very capable young man. I'm running the whole operation in alone. Just a second.
Not one visitor in.
I let Seth into the house. So I have security, but that's about it. Everyone else is on computers. If I'm a little off, you'll know it's because it's not meant to be a one-man show. Okay. So first and foremost, we are now live on all our platforms. Good evening, Jane. Tonight is the 22nd of Shvat. So tonight on the Hebrew calendar is the 22nd of the month of Shvat. It is the 36th yahrzeit of Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, the Rebbe's wife. She passed away, and I remember it vividly. In 1988, I remember my father coming home from shul, and you could see on his face that something was wrong. And we lived on Crown Street at the time in Brooklyn and Crown Heights, and we had a very small home. So I was in the kitchen eating breakfast before school, and I still remember him coming in and sharing the news with my mother that the night before the Rebbetzin had passed away, and the funeral was going to be that day. We didn't go to school. I went with my mother to the funeral. I stood in the women's section and actually had a pretty good view of the Rebbe walking, and the Rebbe was never the same. He lost his wife of decades and decades. They got married in 1928, and this was 1988. So they were together for many years, and he was devastated by the loss. And I remember that very, very vividly. So tonight we mark her yahrzeit. I'll show you, for those, I'll put it by both cameras, a picture of what the Rebbetzin looked like on the day of her wedding. Let me get it to the camera. That's a picture of her. That's a picture of the Rebbetzin on the day of her wedding. Let me do it on Facebook as well. There you go. And I'll show you a picture of what she was like later in life. And that's a picture from later. That's the Rebbetzin. And over there you can see. So tonight, if you have a yahrzeit candle in your house, it would be very apropos to light a yahrzeit candle in memory of Chaim Mushka, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka Bas Harav Yosef Yitzchak. Come give the. Manny wants to say good night, so we're going to let him come in and say good night. Don't sleep in your baseball cap, yeah? See you in the morning. Love you. Okay, so if you have a chance to light a candle, that'll be great. And now we're going to get straight into our learning. So in this week's Torah portion, we discuss, it's the portion of Yisro, Jethro. It's the portion that discusses the giving of the Torah at Sinai, the first two of the Ten Commandments delivered by God directly at Sinai to the Jewish people. After the first two, I am God, your Lord, who took you out of Egypt, which is the obligation to believe in one God and the oneness of God. And that you should not have any other idols, any other lowercase gods in your life. The Jewish people couldn't handle it anymore. They couldn't handle the divine revelation. It was too much. So they begged, they were fainting, they were dying. And God had to resurrect them with a dew of resurrection. So they finally said to Moses, maybe we get another planet because we're going to keep dying. It's not a good process. So the final 8 of the 10 commandments, Moses gave on behalf of God. And of course, Moses went up to Sinai and came down and taught them the Torah. And that's why we associate the Torah with Moses. So the giving of the Torah takes place in this week's Torah portion. There's a very fascinating statement or section in the Talmud, in the tractate of Shabbat. So if you open up the Talmud in the tractate of Shabbat on page 85b, the Talmud says as follows, and then we'll get into the details, but this is straight out of the Talmud. When Moses went up to heaven to get the Torah. Amru Malachi Ashar, the ministering angels said to God, Chamuda Gnuza Shgnuzalach, your great treasure that's been hidden in your treasure chest, referring to the Torah, which your beloved treasure. You want to give it to men, to people of flesh and blood? Why would you take this incredible treasure called the Torah and give it to a bunch of shmagegis on planet Earth who are flesh of blood, full of temptation, full of challenges, full of darkness, full of evil? Why would you give it there? And they said in the words of the book of Psalms, Tna haytcha l'shamayim, place your glory in the heavens. In other words, the angels said to God, give us the Torah. It belongs to us, not to the people down there. So God did a great thing. He said to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, I'm not going to defend you guys. If you think, Moses, that the Jewish people should get the Torah, that humanity should get this code of law, then you answer the angels, Moses. So Moses turns to the angels and says, Moses turns to God and he says to God, the master of the universe, this Torah that you're giving, what does it say? It says, I am God, your Lord, who took you out of Egypt. So Moses said, did you angels go to Egypt? What do you mean, I am God, your Lord, who took you? Who's the you out of Egypt? Angels didn't go to Egypt. Were you guys enslaved to Pharaoh? So that verse of the Torah certainly doesn't apply to you. Why should you get the Torah? If the Torah was meant to be given to a group of people who were enslaved and who left Egypt, and it clearly is because God says, I am God, your Lord, who took you out of Egypt, then the Torah shouldn't go to angels. Furthermore, the Moses said, what's the next thing it says? You should not have any other gods, any idols. Are you guys amongst the nations, the idolatrous nations, that serve idols? Also, it says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Do you guys work all 6 days of the week that you need to rest on Shabbos? So basically, Moses is going, and this is all in the Talmud and the Tractate of Shabbos, he's going verse by verse, commandment by commandment, and proving to the angels that the Torah was never meant for them. He said further, it says, Loisisa, you shouldn't bear false witness. Do you guys do business together that you should have to worry about testifying against each other? It says honor your father and mother. Do you guys have a father and mother, you angels? It also says don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't kidnap. Are you guys jealous of each other? Do you have an evil inclination? Are you angels going to murder? Are you angels going to be jealous? Are you angels going to kidnap anyone? And that was his point, Moses. Sure, it's very nice for you to say that you want to have the Torah in heaven, but let's be honest. Is the Torah even produced by God for angels that don't have these issues? You never went to Egypt. You never work, so you don't have to rest on Shabbos. You don't live amongst idolaters. You don't have parents, so you don't have to honor them. You don't do business, so you don't have to bear false witness. You don't steal. You don't kidnap. You don't murder. So basically, Moses sent the angels packing. That's from the Talmud. On Shavuos, the holiday of the giving of the Torah, 1958, the Rebbe had a long, in-depth discussion about this conversation with the angels. 65 years ago, 1958. And the Rebbe quoted some of the commentators, including the Sfas Emes, the great Rebbe of the Ger Hasidic dynasty. What these commentators say is something very powerful. There's a halacha, there's a law in Judaism that when you want to sell a piece of land, a piece of real estate, halacha says that the right of first refusal, it's called bar metzra, should go to the person that borders the property. So if two Jews are living next door to each other, the law doesn't apply if you live in Montana and you follow the local laws. I don't think there's any laws that obligates a neighbor in Montana to sell his land to the neighbor. But if you lived in a community where everyone was Jewish and following halacha, following the Torah, and the neighbor wants to sell, and you're bordering his property, the halacha is bar metzra, that the connecting neighbor has the right of first refusal. Not only that, the halacha goes as far as to say that if the neighbor went and sold his land to someone else, the Bet Din, the Jewish court, can oblige the buyer to sell it to the neighbor by force, because he should have never bought it in the first place, because the neighbor was not offered the right of first refusal. Now, are there a lot of details to this halacha? Of course, there's thousands of details. And of course, if you want a certain price and it's the going price and the neighbor doesn't want to pay that price, then you can go to whoever wants to buy. But assuming everything works out as the Torah demands, the right of first refusal goes to the neighbor. So the angels come to God, says the commentator, says the Sfas Emes, and other commentaries as well. The Chida. The Chida was named as Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai. He was a rabbi in Israel, then he moved to Italy, and then he's buried in Haram Nuchot in Yerushalayim. I've been to his resting place. It's a Sephardic rabbi, the Chida. So they say that the angels were saying to God, Bar Metzra, where was the Torah till now? In heaven? In God's treasure chest? Who lives in heaven? Human beings don't live in heaven. Angels live in heaven. So therefore, the Torah belongs to us as a right of first refusal. If we don't want it, God, you can give it to the human beings down on earth. But if we do want it, we should have the right of first refusal. We should be able to keep it. And they said, the Torah's in heaven. We are the local neighbors in heaven. And therefore, we have the first right, especially considering that you want to give it to people all the way down on earth, which is so far from the original treasure location of the Torah. What did Moses respond? Moses responded with this whole list, this whole litany that we just said about all the commandments that are not available to the angels in heaven. What was Moshe really saying? So the truth is that what the Rebbe explained in this 1958 talk is that Moses was responding to this exact complaint. They're coming to God and saying, God, we want the Torah because we're owed the right of first refusal. But Moses comes along and teaches them a crash course in Jewish law. Because there's a very interesting halacha. I actually have the Rambam right here, Maimonides, in the laws of neighbors. Believe it or not, in halacha and Jewish law, there's many, many real estate laws. There's actually a section of the laws of neighbors, Shchenim, Hilchas Shchenim. There's 14 chapters to the laws of neighbors. And by the way, most of us would probably do really well if we studied it. You learn a lot about the Jewish approach to how to deal with neighbors. All the way at the end in chapter 14, after 13 chapters, he says like this. In the casually, there's 3 lines that comes from the Talmud above the Metzia, but he says like this. If the buyer wants to buy the property to build homes, but the neighbor who is offered the right of first refusal wants to use it to plant trees, bushes, food, agriculture, this is going to throw a lot of people off, especially in Montana. The halacha is that the person who's willing to buy the land to build homes gets the right of first refusal, not the neighbor. We're talking here about the land of Israel, and there's an obligation to build and grow the land of Israel. Sometimes people get bent out of shape because they hear, oh my gosh, why did you have to build a little village on top of that hill in Judea and Samaria? First of all, because it's our land. Second of all, because when you build it, it creates a stable, a healthy foundational community. And biblically, the more we build in the Holy Land homes for people to live, it's incredibly valuable. So the halacha is, yes, right of first refusal for the neighbor is almost always supreme, except if the neighbor wants to use it for agriculture. I know Ted Turner spent money by 1/3 of our state to make sure it remains unbuilt. In halacha, if a Jew wants to buy that piece of land to build a home or homes for Jewish people to dwell in the Holy Land, it comes ahead of the neighbor who wants it for agriculture. Comes along Moshe Rabbeinu and says to the angels, you guys are claiming that the Torah should belong to you. Why should it belong to you? Because you're the neighbor. Says Moses, there's a famous medrash, the famous teaching that says, I actually mentioned it at yesterday's JLI class, that the entire purpose of creation, of why God created the world, right? If anyone asks you, if you ever like in aisle 8 in Albertsons and someone walks over to you, that's generally where you get the very deep questions that you're supposed to answer on one foot. Rabbi, what do you think about the transmigration of souls? Bubala, I'm trying to get a veggie burger from Dr. Prager's and go home to my wife. Right now, in the middle of aisle 8, you have to ask me about the transmite. You couldn't ask me like a simple question, like, is this item kosher or not? But imagine someone asked you, tell me, Rabbi, curious, what's the purpose of creation? Now, a lot of people would get all tzeflachten. They get all tzebushet. They get all messed up in their head. I don't know. What was I'm supposed to answer you what the purpose of the whole creation of the world is? Yes. It's a very simple answer. The Medrash says clearly. You want to know why there's a world? The purpose of creation, because God wanted a dwelling place in this physical world. He wanted our work to build him a home that he could dwell in a revealed way in all his glory in the physical realm, which obviously ultimately will be when Mashiach comes. But God wanted a dwelling place. He wanted a place where he can be intimate with the physical. A private home, a private place for God to go. He marries the Jewish people at Sinai. Now he wants us to create a home for the couple. And how do you do that? How do you create? Now, if you're a smart spouse, you might want to ask the one you married, what is it you want? You want purple paint in the home? Do you want an indoor, like, you know, do you want a garage where you can park indoors? How many bedrooms do you want, right? If you're a normal spouse, you ask the person you marry. You don't just buy a house and say surprise, unless you want to have a very miserable marriage. So God marries the Jewish people and he says, listen, guys, I'm the groom. I'm the man of the house, if you wish. Of course, God is not a man, but in the figurative, in the metaphorically, we are the bride, he is the groom. We married at Sinai. And he says here, guys, this is what I want for a home. I want you to study Torah. I want you to follow what it says in the mitzvahs, that are mentioned in the Torah, and through that, you're making me a dwelling. You're making me the perfect home that I dreamt of. You're turning this into the great private garden that I dreamt of. The place I want to be, the place I want to dwell. So the angels came and said to the God, hey, we deserve the Torah because we're neighbors. Moses says, yeah, you're neighbors, but what? Are you going to build a home on the property or are you going to use it for agriculture? The ones who are going to build a home, it's only possible if you're a person of flesh and blood, which is why Moses in the Talmud, and that Medrash that's quoted in the Talmud, goes into a hole. You guys have idols? You don't. Did you guys ever go to Egypt? You didn't, right? So very nice. You want to have the land, you want to have the neighbor's land, you want to have the item that's next door, but are you doing what you need to be doing with that property? And the answer is no. Because the only ones that can build a home are human beings of flesh and blood, because they are gifted by God with this thing called mitzvahs. Jews have 613 commandments, Noahides, Gentiles have 7 commandments, and when we live with those commandments, we are creating the home for God. And by the way, and that's why Moses' answer to the angels was very specific. If you want to narrow down what he was saying to them, he answered 2 questions. First of all, you're not in the physical world to be able to make a dwelling place. Number 2, you don't have the ability as an entity to transform something physical into something spiritual. It's against your nature. And that's why if you look at the way he responded, Moses, to the angels, he said, did you go to Egypt? Do you live amongst the idolaters? Do you go to work? Do you do business? Are you jealous? Do you have an evil inclination? In other words, his message to them with that part was, you're not amongst the physical world. You're not in the Tachtainim. You're not in the lower dwellings. You're not in Egypt. You're not amongst the idolaters. Therefore, you're not in the right location in order to even be able to turn it into anything of a home. But the second part is he said to them, do you have a father? Do you have a mother? In other words, what he was saying with that is very powerful. The Rebbe says that Moses was telling the angels, what is a father and a mother? Father and mother have the incredible ability from God. It's the only creation on earth that has the ability to create. Creation, the gift of bringing new life, is a gift that God gives to a father and a mother. And by the way, no matter how many times people in this world will try to say that any type of relationship is okay, which is a discussion for another day, but one thing is certain, the creation of new life is a gift that God gives only when there's a male and female in the picture that are cohabitating, that are creating a union, they're being intimate in a way that brings about new life. So what Moses was telling the angels, Bubalach, you may be wonderful angels, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, amazing angels. But you don't have the ability to create new life. You don't have the ability to create new realities of transformation. You don't have the ability to take something physical and transform it into something spiritual. So sure, you're an angel, you're robotic. You don't, an angel never changes its nature. If you study the Kabbalah, if you study Jewish mysticism, exactly. There's an angel of water, and there's an angel of fire, and there's an angel of wind, and there's an angel of oxygen, and there's an angel of growth. And then it says that every time a blade of grass grows, there's no blade of grass that does not have a spiritual, energetic, an eye that tells it to grow. Very nice. So you have an angel of vegetation. But they are built in with their nature, and they're unchangeable. The beauty of a human being, the way God created us, is not only are we capable of transforming the world, the reason we are capable of transforming the world and creating positive change, and by the way, also negative change if we choose to do so, is that we are capable of changing ourselves, including our nature. Those of you that have had the honor at some point to study the Holy Book of Tanya, the magnum opus of Chabad Hasidism, authored by the Alter Rebbe of Shneur Zalman of Liadi, one of the greatest teachings that he teaches, which was revolutionary at that time. Today, we'll take it for given because we have Hasidus available all over. But back then, it was revolutionary, and that is that the idea that you have a nature and therefore are stuck with that is ludicrous. Sure, if you have a certain natural tendency, it's a little harder to change it. So if you're naturally an angry person for whatever reason, epigenetics, or you were trained by your parents to be angry all the time, sure, it's going to be a little harder for you to change your nature. And maybe that's the whole purpose of your existence, is to prove that change is possible. But the idea when someone says, that's how I am and that's how it is and I can't change, it's the biggest load of BS that anyone ever said. It's simply a lie. And unfortunately, today, even more than ever before in my lifetime, we have whole groups of humanity, including in the world of psychology and therapy, where they tell you, instead of telling you can be a better human being and change, they tell you, oh, we're so sorry that you were born that way. Don't worry about it. Don't feel bad about it. And stay stuck in your anger. And here, pop a pill, and the pill will take care of your anger. Instead of telling someone they should work hard and changing and pausing, comes along Chassidus and says, no, to be a human being by definition, especially to be a Jew, means that not only are you going to make this world a dwelling place for God by transforming simple physical objects into a physical object that is now permeated with revealed spirituality. You take the hide of a cow and you make a mezuzah or tefillin, and you take simple wax and you make Shabbos candles, and you take a piece of chicken and you have a Shabbos meal out of it. Now it's a holy activity. And you take panels of wood and you build a sukkah, and you take flour and water and you make matzah. Now you're connected to God with matzah. And obviously the ultimate is you take sushi on Shavuos and you eat sushi. I'm joking. There's no commandment. It's just a personal, my personal relationship with God. But the point is, I saw Linda. The point is that if you want to change the world, and you believe as a Jew should that the world is changeable, because that's the whole purpose of creation, it needs to start by recognition that being that you are part of this world, you are capable of changing. And maybe it's a slow process, but you are capable of changing your nature.
21 days.
No, that's the mistake, is that almost every group of people that's ever told people they can change, you go to some Tony Robbins program and you step on coals and you think you're going to go home and be skinny, or you're going to go home and be changed and you're never going to be angry again. The only people that make money off the diets and the gyms are the people that own the diet companies and the people that own the gyms. Chassidus comes along and says, you want change? It's a slow process. Ma'at agarshenu, we expel the evil inclination and the evil from within, step by step, baby steps. But baby steps doesn't mean a little step every 2 years and then we feel good about it. We pat ourselves on the back and we get weiter. No, it's a work in progress. But angels don't do that. Angels aren't meant to do that. Angels don't know how to do that. because angels are created robotically. You're an angel of fire, you're an angel of water, you're an angel of air, and God will tell you exactly what to do, and you'll do it because you're a good boy and a good girl. Actually, you're neither. You're a good angel. But human beings, oh, the beauty of a human being is that we have the ability to change. And the biggest crime against humanity in our generation is the children that are told that just because you were born with a certain challenge, just because you were born with a certain inclination, just because you were born angry or sad or depressed or loving to eat food, or you have an addiction to this, that, and the other. By the way, I don't want to bust the bubble of the whole AA system, because there's a lot of value and many people have been helped incredibly by it, and therefore it's not my job to ruin something. But I received a book from my friend Quincy a couple of years ago called The Freedom Model, and it was all about this idea that part of the problem with AA, and again, I'm clarifying, I'm not poo-pooing, if you go to AA, keep it up, but just to give, I'm a Torah Jew, so I have to give Torah perspective. And one of the things that AA does, it tells people you are right, you have to announce, my name is Chaim and I'm overweight, or my name is Chaim and I'm an addict and I'm alcoholic. What do you mean I am an alcoholic? No, I'm Chaim and I have an neshama and I'm capable of changing and I'm capable of overcoming my temptations. Right now, I happen to be highly addicted to sushi. Doesn't mean it's not overcome. You can't overcome. We've trained a whole society to believe that they have an illness that's not curable. And that's a lie. Everything's curable. It just takes a lot of work. Now, if someone has a medical challenge, they need to go to a doctor. If someone has an emotional challenge, they should get help from a therapist. If someone has a mental health challenge, they should go to a psychiatrist. But the premise and the foundation that a person can't change, and you have to announce every week that I'm still the same behemoth from last week, I am still the same animal from last week. That's not a Jewish approach. Now, if AA was a program where you came every week and you said, hi, my name is Chaim, and I still had a drink this week, but I'm doing much better, and I'm working on becoming out. But the language of I am an alcoholic, or I am this, or I am that. No, you're a beautiful entity that's capable of, the sky is the limit. Stop telling people they're unchangeable. And the funny thing is, and I can say this out loud, that Quincy, who gave me the book, was a member of AA for almost 40 years. And when he discovered the Freedom Model, his whole life went upside down. Because imagine you're doing something for close to 40 years, and then you realize, hold on, there's another approach. Not one is right or one is wrong, but from a Torah perspective, the Freedom Model. And it basically says the same thing, that just like diets are a great way to keep the diet business in business, right? If diets really worked, there wouldn't be any diets anymore. You ever thought about that? I've thought about it a lot lately, right? And if gyms,
That one doesn't work. Let's try another one.
I would say if gyms worked, there wouldn't be gyms anymore, but that's not really, but diets for sure. But if AA really worked as a cure, there wouldn't be a need for most of the AA programs, except AA keeps growing and people aren't getting cured because they're being told that once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. No, what do you mean? And I have a guy sitting in the room here right now who hasn't had a drink in, 30 plus years without AA. How's that possible? How's it possible he didn't have a drink without AA? But how many years have you not been in AA?
No.
How many? Over 20?
Yeah.
Over 20. And he comes to the Shabbos table and he sniffs the bottle of Glenlivet and he goes weiter and he doesn't drink it. I mean, personally, I've never been an alcoholic. I've had my fair amount of drinks, and I could also sniff alcohol. It doesn't tempt me at all. I don't have that temptation. I have other temptations. It's not the alcohol. But even if you do have a temptation, the idea that you can't change, you're not an angel. Angels don't change. Humans are capable of change, and that is a beautiful thing. And so the message of Moses to the angels were, guys, it's very nice. It's wonderful that you guys think the Torah belongs to you, but A, you're not in the lower realm of the world, on planet Earth, where you're not in the real world. You got to deal with that. And two, most importantly, is that you don't have the ability to create new life. You don't have the ability to create change. And therefore, this program of the Torah is not for you. But you know who it is for? Every single one of us in the class tonight. God has literally given us his most precious treasure. He said, guys, I've had this treasure. By the way, God kept it in his bosom for, the Torah was given in the year 2448. So 2,500 years after creation, the Torah wasn't given yet. There's some special people, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, a couple people, they got some access. They got early access, VIP access to some information. But most of them, the world didn't get the Torah formally for the first 2,500 years. And then he said, you know what? I want to give my special treasure to you. But here's the condition. You got to make a dwelling place for me, which is why I created this whole world in the first place. And you have to prove to me that you believe that change is possible. And as the Buddhists would say, change starts from within. Right? Remember that story I told you about the hot dog guy selling hot dogs, vegan hot dogs in Manhattan? And a Buddhist, a Hindu came by and he bought a hot dog because it was vegan. He could eat it. And then a Buddhist came by and he says, how much is the hot dog? He says, $2.50. So he gives the guy a $10 bill. He says, hey, my change. He says, change comes from within. Right? The reality is that change does come from within. And when we prove that we are capable of change, now we get into the process of fulfilling the entire purpose of creation, which is to make our beautiful, handsome groom, Almighty God, a dwelling place, an intimate place for him to dwell in the earth that he so wants to dwell in. And the only ones that are capable of bringing that to life are us, not angels, not other creations in the heavenly abodes, not vegetation, not the inanimate, not the animals. Sorry to all you animal lovers. Your dog could be a sweet puppy and cuddle with you, and your turtle could be wonderful, and your tortoise could be amazing, and if you have a pet snake, it could be moidic. But your animal's not changing the world. It wasn't created to change the world. The only ones created to change the world are those that were gifted with the gift of procreation, the ability to make change. And when we learn that, the world becomes a holier place, a more refined place, a place that is worthy of the dwelling of Almighty God. And the ultimate will be when as the prophets tell us, when Mashiach comes, v'ro chol basar yachtav, that all flesh will be able to see Kipi Hashem Dibur as God speaks to the world in all his glory, at the time when all nations, all those that want to serve Almighty God, Jew and Gentile alike, will say, let's go together to the house of God in Jerusalem to serve Almighty God with a belief in the one God. With the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, may it be speedily in our days. Amen. Have a rockin' week, a transformative week. Go ahead and start changing yourself. While you're at it, you change the world. And we'll see. A commercial message for next week. I will be at a simcha out of town on Wednesday night. If I'm able to pull off a class on Thursday night, there will be a Thursday morning email that says there's class Thursday night. It's for a wonderful thing. It's for a first cousin's wedding. And where's the wedding going to be? Should I announce it to the whole world? What if they want to find me? I don't want people to know where I am. It's an undisclosed location in New York that I will be for a wedding. And I'll see you back here next week. Sometime next week. Sei gesund.
Thank you.
This you want to say hi? Look who's on here.
Hi.
Oh, Mitchell and Linda and Nick, and there's a dog somewhere. Oh,
Two dogs.
we have dogs in class.
Good night.
John, good night. There's Margot and Chagai, and there's Seth.